Hello there, my name is John Tojek, and today we are doing an Xfrog tutorial. Introduction. The first thing we do is get the Xfrog plugin working. Make it loaded, auto-load, and we're ready to begin. First we'll get the Xfrog Shelf. It has a bunch of icons and the Xfrog pull-down menu. All of our commands are in these two places. Our most important icon is the Xfrog Visor. It's so important, we'll use it at all times, bring it in as a panel. We mostly work between this visor and the attribute editor. And here we have the average man, 176 centimeters tall. This is the typical size of a human, and we're going to base our first tree on this size. Here are our main branches. The best object to use is the branch. That's where we start. I throw down 2 branches here. And first thing I'm going to do is scale them up so we can see them. They begin very small, like 10 centimeters. Instead, I'll make this about 4 meters tall. So we have 2 big branches there. Now we can get rid of the man because we don't need him anymore. And we'll put a little bit of bark texture on the branches. Thank you, man. And now we're done with the GPU rendering. Let's just go to a shading, simple shading with some simple colors. And now these 2 branches are going to make into a hierarchy. I will child one branch under the other. So you click one, then the other, hit child. These 2 branches now are controlled by the curves underneath. It's very similar to an extrusion. As I make the circle smaller, then the branch gets smaller. As I make the shape curve longer, then the full branch gets longer. The top of the hierarchy controls everything underneath. And since we're in Maya, I can use things like the Deformer. So here I do a typical bend deformer on one shape curve. Because Xfrog is completely inside of Maya, all of the tools completely work. So I could use skeletons, clusters, or even pulling around CVs. So let's do some simple shaping with just pulling CVs. Here, I grab from the trunk, I pick some CVs, and I just translate them around. I'm really just bending the trunk of the tree. Then I'll go to branch number 2, which is lower in the hierarchy. And there I will also grab CVs of the branches. As I move the CVs around, I can get some small bending and just a little bit of shaping. Xfrog has other tools for this called Tropism and CurveNurbs, but we'll get to those later. Also notice my polys are a little low res, so I can increase by path smoothing and give me more polygons. This way you can do level of detail, have a low res tree and a high res tree. Another thing to play with is growth. Growth controls from 0 to 1 how large the scale is of the branches. And if it's in a hierarchy, everything below. So you could grow an entire tree from the root all the way up to a final full-fledged tree. This growth variable can also be keyframed. So this is great for making vines that travel around and a tree that grows in the bottom. But the most important thing are the standard curve parameters. Every branch and every other object node has a number of these parameters. First, we're going to look at thickness. There's a default thickness which looks like this spiky cylinder. Now, by moving the control points around, I can change the thickness at different points on the curve. So it's no longer a spike, but I've made it more of a tube of equal size. Same thing with the branches. Every variable inside of Xfrog has one of these control curves with it. They start with some default shapes, but then you can make them much more advanced. You can add CVs and remove the control vertices. Let's now make 20 branches instead of 10 with the node number. Now I'm going to go back to my original one and do some more standard curves. This one is distribution. This allows me to push all the branches to the top of the trunk rather than at the bottom. Another good one is growth. I would like the branches at the top to be longer. So the numbers always go from 0 to 1, left to right, and beginning of the trunk to the end of the trunk. Node angle controls how they come off the trunk. Here I'm going to add a control point. I middle mouse, add it, and then I can move the control point. And now I'm changing the angle at the middle of the trunk. And now I'm changing at the end of the trunk. So this is the angle that the branches come out of the tree. Let's move on. Now that I've got this tree set, I want to put some things inside of it. In this case, I'm going to grab a flower that I built in another package. I made this thing in Blender, a little cartoon flower, and I want to add it to the hierarchy. So I leave it there at 0, I select it first, and I say top. It's going to grab it, it's going to put it right at the head. Or I can grab the branch and say flower, branch, head, and it's going to put a flower at the end of every branch. I can also say flower, branch, shape, and it will put the flower along the shape of the curve. And then the last one you can do is flower, branch, child. And this has an arrangement along the branch once again. These arrangements have different control variables that you can adjust. But in this way, you can fill your tree. So here I'm going to go with just head once again. A flower at the end of each one. Another thing I'm going to do is throw down a Taurus. Anything inside of Maya can be used. And I do Taurus, branch, shape, and those Tauruses are now along the branch. You can't see them yet because they're very, very small. You know, Maya works in the centimeters. I got a 4-meter tree here, so I'm bringing it up. I scale these things up, and I can see that they're arranged along every branch. I can make them thicker or less thick. I can make them perpendicular, or in this case, they're riding along. Because they're riding along the branch, I'll make it chrome, and let's just show a little bit of rendering. I will go into the GPU real-time rendering of V-Ray and just show how everything in Xfrog is completely integrated inside of Maya. So the things you do in Maya, Xfrog works just along with it. It's very native. Even though I'm real-time rendering here, I can go ahead and still change any of the variables. So here I'm changing the angle. This is where they come off the tree. Another fun one to play with is growth. I can change the growth still. Even though we're real-time rendering, all the variables work just the same. Another fun thing to play with is the shape of the branches coming off the trunk. In this case, I'll go to Multiplication tab, and I can change them to be alt perpendicular, which makes more of a fern type of a pattern. There's a number of these arrangements, and in the manual, we have a description of each one and how they're defined. They're botanical, they're mathematical, and they're different natural ways that plants arrange themselves that we can choose and that are inside of Xfrog. Now, let's get out of that and move back to a normal tree. I like the chrome donuts, but there's a limit to this. So, I delete the donuts, and then I'm going to tell my arrangement to go back to perpendicular, which is sort of the default for branches. Update, and the thing becomes more of a tree again. And here I'm going to show off copy and paste a tree. I grab it from the very bottom, copy the whole thing, and move it over. Now we have two identical trees. They both have full history, and they're both completely live. And this is a technique we use to copy branches over from one tree to another, or make multiple branches and variations of them. It happens very quickly. I'm going to show one other thing now about the curves that make up this tree. Here I'm going to make a new shape curve. Remember, my original shape curve was a straight line, and later I pulled CVs around. Now, using a powerful tool here in the family curves, I'm going to give this tree a new shape curve. So, branch 3, I say free the original shape curve. It goes away, and now this new one that's on the ground, I'm going to force that in. I go to family, and this is where the construction is. It's a new path curve. I just hit the plus sign, and my tree automatically becomes a part of that new curve. I send myself back to 0, and one other thing that's powerful here is that curve is still live, right? Maya works this way. I can just keep drawing the tree from here, and everything underneath will keep following because all of the commands we've given it in the hierarchy, they're parametric. They're still live, and they're still following what they're supposed to do. Remember, Xfrog stands for X Windows Based Finite Recursive Object Generator. That means it's always live and things are always moving around in here. So now, I don't really need a tree on the ground, but that would be good for making vines or any other thing. So now I'm going to go ahead and delete that branch. Xfrog Visor has a delete button and a free button. That one just deletes it out. And free just removes it from the hierarchy. So next, I'm going to look at some of the other objects in here. We've started with the branch object. That was a powerful one. It's a multiplier object. Let's next look at tropism. Tropism is when the tree moves towards gravity, gravitropism, or when the tree moves towards the sun, phototropism. So basically, it generally affects all the branches. So let's make these branches straight again. I grab all the CVs of the original branch. I tell the Z go to 0, they all turn straight. This is typical Maya stuff. Then I say, I wouldn't mind getting rid of those flowers. I want to put something else on there. So I'm going to go find the flower in the hierarchy, and I say free. Just remove it from the hierarchy. It's still totally normal flower, and then you can delete it or use it for something else. But that's how you bring things in and out of the hierarchy. Then I'm going to go ahead to the primitives and grab myself a super shape. These are fun to play with because they have this random button. So I tell it to be on the head of every branch once again. Then I scale it up. Then I'm going to pick this super shape, go to the attribute editor, and notice I'm always working between two things. The visor on the left, the attribute editor on my right. I assign a chrome shader to these guys, and I just want it to be a nicer shape. You hit random 3 or 4 times, it goes through the super shape options, and there, I got my marshmallow shape. It's just loud and obnoxious, I like it. Now, I've got a new thing there, and I've got tropism, and I'm going to say that this branch that is now straight, I want it to respect tropism. I find the curve, and then I hit the plus sign on tropism, and it puts it into the tropism thing. It's very light at first. I do negative Y, positive Y. I want it to go down. It's not super strong yet, but I can go to the intensity curve parameter, and just like all the other parameters in Xfrog, I can add points, middle mouse. Then after you've added it, you select it, and then move it, and then I can force the tropism to be much stronger. I grab the CVs at the top of the thing, and those at the top of the tree are even stronger. Then I'm going to go back down to the original trunk and go to node angle. And this time I want the node angle, they stick, the branch branches upwards and the tropism pulls it downwards. You can do all sorts of combinations like this, and it's a naturally occurring fact of nature. This is plants that often go towards the sun, or they lean down towards the ground. Or you can even add variables. You could add an object in any direction you want. Here, let me show an example of doing it on the axis. Let's say it goes in the X direction. Or that's super Y. That's go up high. Or the X direction. Just go off to the left. That could be used for a wind effect if you wanted. Or if it's next to a wall, you want it to go away from the wall. Or an arbitrary sphere. You put it in a sphere, you just have it go towards that direction. So that is tropism. It's a common botanical behavior. Now, some of the other great objects that are very exclusive to Xfrog are the Phyllotaxis and the Hydra. These are once again more icons in the upper left, and they do shapes found in nature. So I'm going to make myself 3 branches, and these branches, I'm going to put them into the Phyllotaxis and the Hydra. So first thing I do when I make these 3 branches is, once again, I make it big. I get my world size up, and I'm going to apply some simple shaders. So let me make them spiky, a little bit thin, and then I go and get some shaders. The shaders and materials and the UVs all work in the standard Maya way. The UVs are clean as the thing is generated, and you can apply any shader you want. Here I just happen to be using V-Ray, but you can use any of the renderers, Arnold, Mental Ray. Then I go ahead and create a Hydra and a Phyllo. They have nothing in them yet until I put the branch inside of them. I do that with child. So it's branch, Hydra, child. That puts it underneath. Then I grab the Hydra, move it over to the left, and I'll do the same. Branch, Phyllo, child. So you always pick the child first, then the place it's going to go, and then you hit the word child. So now I've got a Hydra and a Phyllo, and we'll go over some of the additional parameters inside of these two Xfrog objects. There's a collection of 6 Xfrog objects, and we've gone over 4 of them now. Now, let's see. In the Hydra, a good one is just a fan. You know, do you want it to go around 360 or just 180? Here we get it down to 180, and we could put it on the ground this way. It's more of a half of a fan. Another good one to play with is scaling of the Hydra. So in this case, you can, they're all the same size. You know, they're all size of 1. You could make the middle ones larger, and then the ones on the end smaller. So to do this, I add a point. Remember, it's always middle mouse, add the point, then you go to the move tool, and then move the point. These numbers can be moved around graphically, or you can also put in the actual number. If you want 50, 30, 100, it's in the point parameters, just above this interface. Now I've scaled down the ones on the end, and I'm going to play with the branch shape. First, it's like a spike right now, and it's kind of sharp. I'm going to make it into a flat so that we can see when it turns. So it's kind of wide and flat, more like a fin, like a shark fin. Then I go to the Hydra, and this way we'll see an effect when I hit the twist parameter. So using twist, I've got an interesting effect there. And then another one that's real good is the spin parameter. And spin can allow them to stay where they are, but they will spin on their own little axes. And when you combine all of these parameters, you can get incredible plant-like feelings. Here we have the number of fins. Now I turned it up to 25, so we have a much denser fan. The last thing to look at is the shape of the branch. I no longer want that real spiky look. I'm going to give it more of a bamboo shape since we have bamboo as the texture, and I'm just going to shape it around a little bit. You can do anything you want. I mean, you could even change the circle or the curve that creates it, the shape curve. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the Phyllotaxis. I want that thing to no longer be a spike, but just more of a tube, something a little natural that has variety. I can have more or less control points if I would like. And then I'm going to make them shorter, just more of a ball. And then I'll start to begin the curve parameters. One of the good ones is node scale. This can help me to get it to have a bottom and a top. And in this case, I want a flat bottom, because I'm going to put this thing on the desert floor. Also, I can go to node angle. This will change the angle and move it around. There's a full-featured documentation that explains more about this in a botanical way, because these are based on nature, these rules. And they were brought in here to make plant-like objects. Now, let's see what we're going to do with the shape. Try and get that shape to be a little thicker. Make it look like a succulent. You know, like a fat little finger of the cactus. These curves are the default, but remember, I could remove some of those control points or add more to make anything I want. Now, one additional tool we've got a third branch sitting there. He's not involved. I'm going to add the variety tool. And this allows me to add variation inside Phyllotaxis or inside of Hydra. So it's what I do. I'm going to pull out the branch that exists there. I hit free. And I'm going to put in variation instead. And variation is going to be my new child of Phyllotaxis. And variation can then take in as many branches as we want. Right now I have 2 branches available, so I hit the plus sign and that branch goes in there. Once again, I pick variety and the other branch, I hit the plus sign and the second branch goes in there. Now, 2 different branches are inside my Phyllotaxis. And if you want, you could have as many branches as you would like. You just need to hit a multiplier. Once they're in there, you can randomize them, or they could be spread in a pattern, or there's also a sequential pattern. It's not as clear in this Phyllotaxis, but there's a way to make it very mathematical or very random, like nature. Once again, I'll take my red branch and change the shape to make it a little more like nature, to make it a little more like a succulent, so it fits with the other branch that's in there. One other thing you can do with the variety node is you can make blank spots. You could say I don't want anything at some of these areas. Now, we have covered almost all of the objects there on the Xfrog Shelf. There is one remaining called CurveNurbs. I'm going to go into that in a future tutorial. Next, I'm going to cover some trees, how to build a realistic tree, and then maybe a flower and how to do good flowers with some wind. But this CurveNurbs is a more advanced curve. Maya curves are great, but CurveNurbs is more mathematically defined. We're going to try that later, and it helps you to build plants that grow and just make more realistic plants. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will talk soon.